Hi guys, I'm Natasha and welcome back to another episode of The Usual Place. A recent report card by the Traffic Police, or the Annual Road Traffic Statistics for 2025, paints a sad picture of the state of our roads. 149 people died on the roads last year, a 10-year high. More people have been injured in accidents. The number of elderly who died in accidents more than doubled in just a year. And the number of accidents caused by those who ran the red light also jumped. And on average, almost 700 people were caught speeding daily. So we have to ask, what is happening on our roads? Is there not enough enforcement, or are we actually just really bad road users? Or is this something much harder to fix, like a culture problem? Now, today I have two guests who can help me make sense of why our roads are in this state. First, next to me, I have Jason Lim, chairperson of the Riding Safety Association of Singapore, a motorcyclist interest group. And you also co-own Roads.sg, which I watch a lot of. It's one of Singapore's most active dashcam communities, documenting our roads every day.
That's right. Thanks
Welcome.
for being a fan.
Well, thank you for coming on The Usual Place. And next to you on the couch, I have Bozy Lu, a lawyer and partner at Han & Lu Law Chambers. And you specialise in road accidents claims and community law. So you see a lot of these videos and you deal with a lot of claimants who come by and who have been in accidents.
That's right,
So it could be pedestrians, motorists, cyclists, all sorts?
All sorts. Drivers as well, because when drivers collide into other vehicles, that results in injury and sometimes property damage as well. So over at our side, we do a lot of claims, for the folks who get injured and are victims.
All right. So thank you both for being here. And I want to get into it by asking, the statistics don't really paint drivers and other road users here in very good light. So we have traffic cameras everywhere. Our smart cars have a lot of tech to actually prevent accidents. And lorries have speed limiters. And the TP traffic police have actually said they're stepping up enforcement. So how come our roads are like that? I'm looking at Jason because you see this.
Yes. Why are the stats still going up, right?
Yeah, why is the stats going up?
I think it's a really interesting question to jump into because at the end of the day, it's about user behavior. And when you put a collective group of human beings on the road, each one operating their own vehicle and wondering, how will they fit together and all that. Within the guidelines of the rules is one part of it. So we look at the stats a lot from the standpoint of, running red lights, for example, you mentioned speeding and all that. Those are more enforcement guidelines. But just in general, how are people thinking when they're behind the wheel of the car? Right? It's a collection of so many different things, such as the culture of trying to get ahead, or our kiasu culture of being first, and just the hectic work culture of everyone needs to get somewhere in double time, right? Who is moving around thinking, I got all the time in the world? Generally speaking, everyone wants to get somewhere on time for a certain reason, right? So we live in a very hectic culture. We live in a culture where we need to do things in order to get ahead. And that also leads to this whole concept of entitlement. And, this space is mine, it's within my right to be filling up that road. Don't come and signal and come into my lane because I'm not giving you that space. I need that space, even though it saves me a negligible amount of time to get ahead of you and to cut you off, right? But that culture actually exists and it's quite sad here in Singapore.
Bozy, agree? Is this what some of your clients are saying when they say, hey, not my fault, this guy cut me off?
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's also being on the roads and being distracted on the roads, right? We talk about, a culture of having to be at a certain place at a certain time, multiple things going on. It's like a culture of having to multitask. Right? We've always got so many things going on in our heads that we, sometimes driving becomes like a second nature. Right? It's like
it does, absolutely.
It's a little bit like swimming, right? You go in, you sort of know how to, breathe out of water and also just get your way around. And for driving, especially if you're driving in somewhere that's very familiar, it's short of saying you're closing one eye, which you absolutely should not.
You can zone out sometimes.
You could zone out.
Or driving.
Exactly, yeah. And sometimes, what we call accidents are accidents because you never expect it. Right? You never thought every day I'm driving like that, it's all okay. Then once in a blue moon, suddenly, somebody
your whole plan changes, like something,
exactly.
like a random pedestrian turns out when you didn't think so. Or,
precisely, yeah.
And I think this is a good point to also mention that one of the reasons we're all distracted is because we're literally glued to our mobile devices all the time. And it's hard for someone who is constantly glued to their mobile device to sit in the car and suddenly be I will not get distracted by this at all for the next 30 minutes, right? And I mean, we check our phones.
It's like phone anxiety, right?
Yeah,
Then
we
it's
check our
like,
phones every
is
few
anyone messaging
seconds,
me?
not even
Yeah.
minutes, right? So I think that is a growing issue. But I think the authorities have done a lot to step in to try to curb this, using penalties, of course. But user behavior is another thing, right? How do you not get distracted when your phone chimes when you're driving? How do you not glance? Because that glance down can make the difference
The
between
split second.
that split second,
Yeah.
an accident or not, right? Yeah.
So what kind of accidents are what are most common causes of accidents you see when you're looking at your submissions on Roads.sg?
Okay. So I've tried to look at a lot of the videos with the purpose, not for this podcast, but I've tried to label the videos based on accidents and all that before. It was too much. I couldn't. We receive an incredible number of submissions a day for things
How
like
many
that.
are we
yeah.
looking at?
Oh, we're looking at sometimes it can be close 50 and 60 and above. Yeah, depending on the number of incidents.
I thought you
yeah.
were going to say 300, but okay, 50 is to
300
So
within
still quite a lot.
That's still a lot. Imagine how many we process
Yeah.
in a day,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Of course, some days are quieter days, which is not a bad thing. Actually,
Absolutely.
quiet days are actually not a bad thing for a platform like ours. But sometimes we get a lot, right? And I look at it from this standpoint. Instead of classifying it, I look at the behaviors behind what is happening. And a lot of times, one of the type of videos we receive too many of that we don't even post all of them is beating the red light. It happens so much that we can no longer post all of it because then our page will be all about that only, right? It's like it doesn't make sense anymore. Yeah, unless it's very blatant, and as a driver myself, I want to say I haven't beaten the red light, but I can understand. I can understand how some of these drivers, what leads to that behavior. That behavior is that a yellow light means I have to speed up, not slow down, right? And whether they're in a hurry or for whatever reason, and then being distracted. And the lights change suddenly, especially in a small road, you just go right through, right?
Yeah.
So little things like that. So back to your question, what do we receive a lot of? I think we receive a lot of videos that are just people who are unhappy with each other over
just like road rage.
non-accident related issues.
Okay.
Sometimes I joke a lot that we get this. The line we get the most is, "Please make this guy famous."
Oh dear.
Yeah, which is like, nope, that's not what our page is for, right? Inadvertently, yes, if we put up something, because we are the most viral site in Singapore right now as far as traffic accidents are concerned, it does make not the driver, but the car and the incident famous. People talk about it, but we don't function to be a conduit to somebody's road rage lah. My job is not to go there and you're not happy with this guy, so let me make him famous. That's not what it's for. We really have a very specific focus on whether or not that video has a safety message behind it, or whether you can learn something from it. And I always think to myself, before a driver steps out and gets into the car, or before a pedestrian goes out, and if they manage to see one of our videos and that makes them a slightly safer driver that day, or a more cautious driver, feeling like this could happen to me too, then mission accomplished. We have done the service that we are here to provide, and then to remind everyone that the roads is a very dangerous place. It really is. It's incredible how often we forget it. Yeah.
So I want to ask Bozy, like in a similar vein to what I asked Jason, what sort of traffic cases are you seeing most of nowadays?
If I were to look at not so much of how the accident happened, but who the accident involves, right? We do see a fair number of these elderly, and the most heartbreaking ones are the children who are involved in road traffic accidents, right?
Yes.
Like young kids who, maybe just coming back from school, or, just traveling around. And I think the most heart-aching ones are always the fatal accidents that come through our doors.
Yeah, pedestrians?
The pedestrians, yeah. And sometimes it doesn't have to be pedestrians. If there was a very huge collision, a huge impact once, it could be a driver who has passed away as well.
That's right.
So, and sometimes it's not just the vehicles that are like your motor cars, your six-seaters or whatever, but there are also buses, trailer trucks, all sorts of different vehicles. In our office, we've got like little toy cars and models, so that when we interview the clients, we see, how the accident happened, they can move the little pieces around.
Oh, right.
And you often wonder, so that's like a prelude to seeing a video per se. If we don't get sight of the video, you always wonder whether the accident can be preventable in one way or another, right? As what Jason has mentioned. And we see a lot of these very likely preventable accidents.
Yeah.
It's just, I think that, when we go on the road, it doesn't come to us as a thing that, if we get into an accident, or whether we do get into an accident, it's going to be so serious per se, because, everybody should know to stop or otherwise. But we don't seem to have that innate understanding that everyone, not just the road drivers, but also the pedestrians and, cyclists, anyone who's using the road needs to take care of themselves. Yeah.
So I want to ask about speeding, because speeding is a huge problem going by the statistics. So 695 people on average were caught speeding daily. That's a lot. And the number of speeding violations increased by 26% from 2024 to 2025. So why do you think we're so prone to speeding? I mean, what does it tell us about how Singaporeans treat speed limits? Is it a suggestion, or they think they won't get caught? What do you think, Jason?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this subject, especially when it comes to speeding, right?
Yeah.
First of all, cars and bikes are getting more powerful by the year. Every time you see a new model launch, it's more powerful. Everyone's so focused on the horsepower, that kind of thing. And to be fair, we are getting better brakes, we are getting better wheels, the cars are designed to be safer nowadays. Now, let's talk about speeding. Speeding is such a big problem, and yet in and of itself, it's not speed that is the problem. You get what I mean? It's the handling, it's the usage, it's the reckless behavior behind the speeding that is the real problem that causes the accidents. Yeah, and I highlight that because the skill sets, as well as how someone uses their vehicle, is very important. The thought process behind it. And I think in general, everyone is pushing the speed limit or a bit more because of this need to get to places, right? This need to get to places in the shortest amount of time. We are very, very seldom doing things leisurely in our day-to-day life, right? So I think this impatient society, this hectic society that we live in, really contributes to that. Of course, there's this whole element of just recklessness that comes with, pushing the speed way above the limit. Yeah.
I mean, I think I can kind of speak to why this, as in the question is, why are we so impatient? I guess because I want to say I am a driver, I just gave out my car. But I guess the mindset is, and you can disagree or agree with me, is that basically we think we have a car so that we can get to somewhere a lot faster, that we don't plan in advance. I think I can make it to town in 15 minutes. I mean, do you agree? This is the mindset. And then when you get there and you hit traffic, you're like, oh no, I'm going to take 25. So now I got to start. I mean, I'm not saying I did this, but I'm thinking this is how people think. Is that the mindset?
Definitely. There's an ongoing meme about how everyone's trying to beat the GPS timing, right? The GPS says you'll reach in 25, I gotta get there in 23, right?
Yeah.
But of course, that's a joke, although I think it's in the psyche of some people to get there ahead of time. Definitely agree with that. I think we are always, a lot of people are rushing to get somewhere. And not to mention the amount of vehicles on the road that are being used for work. Private hire,
Exactly.
transport, commercial vehicles. Time is everything for them. I mean, think about it. I'm just getting from meeting to meeting. They are getting as the more deliveries they can do, the more. So the temptation to take it over the speed limit is always there, I think, and that's where the danger lies.
Bozy, thoughts on speeding?
Absolutely. So, just jumping on what Jason said about private hire drivers, we have quite a sizable number of clients who are from that community because, they're on the roads all day. It's just by virtue of the fact that, that's their job and the risk is just much higher. And oftentimes we ask them, say, oh, why go so fast? They say, oh, because I've got this job that is able to be done. And then my passenger is chasing me like there's no tomorrow. I mean, it's not my fault that they're late, but they asked me to go faster. So I said, I cannot go that much faster. They say, you can. You have the steering wheel. And, it's come to a point where it's like as if when you drive a car, that's your machine. That you can just in Transformers and then, go straight forth. But they forget that there are these other road users, or rather they don't pay enough attention to that because they want to do that customer service job properly, while being on the road, be it delivering a client or rather fetching a client from one place to another, or delivering a parcel, a packet of food, whatever it is. So if it's an entire culture of everybody who is on these, apps, to say that I want to get this ASAP, right? Then that drives the culture as well. So speed then becomes the probably only thing they can control, right? I mean, they can be sweet-talking the customer at the back of the car, but, at the end of the day, it's about how quickly I can get this done. So if that's the only metric for, your KPI as a private hire driver for most of it, then it is no wonder how they would want to use the car to really go ahead. But that being said, I must also commend and also applaud a fair number of private hire drivers whom I've met personally who say that it doesn't matter what the customer says. Look, I will drive safely because this is my job and it is my life that is on the roads.
Yeah. If I may add to that point on speeding due to the pressures that you face, I mean, there's two main things here. One is the fact that we often say that road safety is a shared responsibility. But this brings up a very interesting point that is also a shared responsibility of people who are not on the road. The people who are adding the pressure of come now, where's my food, right? Where's my, why am I waiting 8 minutes for my ride to arrive? Like the pressure given by people who are not on the road is also a shared responsibility, and it's part of the culture that we need to think about as well, right? That's the first thing. I think the other thing that I want to mention with regards to speeding is that a lot of studies have been done and proven that no matter how much you push the speed, the amount of time that you save is actually quite negligible. It's not like, like what they say, you are the one behind the steering wheel, do something about it, right? But the truth is the amount of savings over a long distance, I mean, of course, the longer the distance, the more savings there is, but over the type of distances that we do in Singapore, it's almost negligible, You're talking about 1 minute to 2 minutes of savings in terms of time. How much can that really affect in the bigger picture? So that's an interesting point, right?
I think what I'm hearing is we just need to plan better. Like the people who take Grab shouldn't be taking it like 15 minutes from their appointment and then you're pressuring the driver to go faster, or the people who are at home waiting for delivery can be a bit more patient is what I'm hearing. Because it sounds like we just prioritize efficiency and it's like, if I want it now kind of thing, right? Yeah. And so I also want to talk about another group of people, which is the motorcyclists, which Jason, you are.
Please,
also...
that's my pet topic, yes.
Okay, well, so motorcycles actually make up just about 15% of Singapore's total vehicle population, but motorcyclists and pillion riders were involved in 54.8% of all traffic accidents and accounted for 53% of deaths. So, Jason, what's happening here?
Yes. So let's talk about motorbikes, right?
Yeah.
There is a very good reason why they make up most of the stats, even though they are a tiny fraction of the number of vehicles on the road. And the first and main thing is that motorcyclists, just because of the nature of the vehicle, are the most vulnerable on the road. Okay. Now, I say that with a caveat that cyclists are even more vulnerable because they don't have engines on their bike. But that the number of them on the road is very, very low. Motorcyclists, there are a lot of who use it for commuting, getting in and out. There are a lot of motorcyclists that come in from across the causeway as well for work purposes every day. Yeah, it's not a small number, by the way, right? It's a lot
early
that comes
in the morning.
through. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And today, motorbikes are the vehicle of choice for those doing, delivery kind of services as well as food delivery. So I think that it's a combination of they are prone to all the dangers that a car driver is susceptible to as well, but they are way more vulnerable because it's flesh covering metal and not metal boxing in the human being, right? Yeah. So riding behavior and all that in Singapore is something that I think the authorities, the schools and all that have done a lot to try to inculcate. If you know, taking a car license versus a bike license is way harder to get a bike license. And that's from someone who has worked my way through the various classes of bike licenses through the years, right? And the training is good and it's fantastic. But sometimes when you get out on the road, remembering the training and realizing what are the elements that keep you safe is very, very important as well. So I always classify the safety of bikers into two main areas, right? It's actually number one is skill sets. Right? Yes, you need skill sets to operate all kinds of vehicles, from cars to lorries to everything. You need skill sets. But for a motorcycle, especially, if you understand how much is involved in riding a motorcycle, all four of your limbs are fully involved. There's the clutch, there's the accelerator, there's the brake, there's the gear change. And I'm overemphasizing this because I know a lot of people do not have motorbike licenses and they don't realize that there's no room for distraction when you're riding a motorbike, right? You are fully engaged with all four limbs as compared to a car, most automatic cars today, one foot, one hand, and you can carry on with your stuff. So then there's a danger of trying to tap on something with the other hand or do stuff, okay? So the first thing is skill sets. How do you operate the bike? Skills and your ability to stay out of accidents are directly related, right? Because if you look at one interesting stat that it's not talked about in the statistics that came out, we have distracted driving or riding or operating a vehicle as the number one reason. But if you look at the second reason, it was actually related to the skill sets of operating your vehicle because of losing control of your vehicle. Now, the stats don't break down whether it's a motorbike or a car, but how often have you seen people lose control of their car? Seriously, it's a lot less than motorbikes. It's not difficult to lose control of your motorbike.
From the videos that I've seen on Roads.sg, I can't tell anymore.
Okay,
yes.
so generally speaking, for cars, they lose control due to overly high speed, right? For motorbike, I can lose control of it in a small little car park because it's a skill set issue, okay? Yeah. So skill sets is one thing that I think needs to be continually upgraded as a bike rider. I've ridden for more than 10 years and I've ridden in many different scenarios, many different kinds of bikes. And I tell you, I'm still learning something all the time. I'm still trying to learn something all the time, right? So that's one part because I really believe that correlates to my safety. The second thing is decision-making for motorbike riding. You see motorbikers get a bad rap for lane splitting. Boom, they're going by and in a tight road, jam in the morning, and then the bikes go boom like that, right? Then you go down the line and touch wood, there's a jam. Why? Because somebody was lane splitting, somebody decided to change lane at the wrong time, and boom, there you go, right?
Accident. Yeah.
But it's not illegal to lane split in Singapore.
Do you think it should be made illegal?
So that's a very
dicey question.
No, it's not dicey. I have my thoughts on it, right?
Okay.
I think that the efficiency of a motorbike, it lends certain advantages to getting to certain places a bit faster when you lane split. However, I think there should be guidelines around lane splitting, right? And some of the general rule of thumb, like in some countries, I think it's Australia, where you can lane split only if traffic is at a standstill. Right?
Yeah.
So that means I reach a traffic jam, I want to get to the front, everyone's not moving, I go, right? In Singapore, you can lane split when the cars beside you are going at 90 to 100 km per hour, right? Yeah. So
I mean, I would think that's quite dangerous, especially when cars start to filter out and then they don't notice the motorbike coming at like such. And this is how accidents, I've seen it a lot on expressways when they just crash into the car because they can't stop in time.
A lot of the morning accidents in crowded expressways are not due to speed. It's due to things like that, right? Not seeing each other, lane splitting and all that. So herein lies the crux of it. It's ironic that you think, high speed, so I lane split is more dangerous. Actually, it's about the differential in the speed between the vehicles you are passing. If the vehicles are crawling at 20 and you go through at 100 or 90, very, very high risk. But if you guys are all kind of around the same speed or matching, the risk is actually not nearly as high. Because you're all moving at around the same pace, right? So one of the things that we talk about is when you want to lane split, you shouldn't lane split at a speed differential more than 30 km per hour from whatever the cars are doing. So if the cars are at a standstill, you shouldn't be lane splitting at 60. Around 30, you can actually got plenty of time to react. And that number actually follows. If the cars are going at 50, you shouldn't be going more than 70, or that kind of thing. So that actually maintains a fair amount of safety. Now, that is not the foolproof way of solving that problem. Skill sets and decision making. So I count that whole differential in speed. It's not illegal, and I'm not going above the speed limit. But why is it so dangerous? It's a decision making issue, right? In that spot, knowing that I shouldn't be going at that speed and that speed can cost me my decision making moments is everything. Yeah.
Bozy, have you seen like cases like what Jason is talking about in the decision-making situation?
Absolutely. Lane splitting. And I think something that really, Jason, what you said resonates with me is on the road, the skill set is really that decision-making power that you have, right? With the vehicle that you're driving or riding, that lane splitting situation. Oftentimes what I see are chain collisions of lane split motorcyclists just, going one after another, and then it sort of, goes left, right, center, then it boom, boom, boom.
Yes.
Right? And it's so heartbreaking because, it all took just like one person to be lane splitting at the wrong time.
That's right.
And then, the back person going like, I could have stopped, but I was also just like maybe a little bit fast and then just hit onto it.
Yeah.
Because we may not have expected people to lane split. If everybody drives thinking that, the motorcyclist is going to lane split, so I better be careful. Then again, I'm not sure if that then emboldens the motorcyclist to do the lane splitting so audaciously per se. But I do see it, quite a fair bit. But I think what I would see a little bit more is in terms of the morning periods where cars are really jammed and it breeds frustration.
Yes.
Right? Everybody is trying to get to somewhere at the same time, 9 a.m. everybody's, but therein comes a lane split of a motorcycle. Because maybe for us, we see the client through the entire like post-accident, how it affects their jobs, their lives and their family members. I think when they're in that moment, when an accident happens, right, they're actually very focused in that moment per se. Look, I'm getting to somewhere, I want to do this, I want to do that. They forget that, look, I'm driving a machine on the road, that there could be dire consequences if, I don't drive properly. So when you're so fixated or focused, in that sense, and you don't realize that some of your behavior could very well, lead to consequences that cannot be remedied really because of the long-term impacts, then that makes driving actually quite a dangerous, task. We're not talking about bumper cars here where you have a rink and you go in, but we're talking about big roads, expressways, and these are, I think, the practical difficulties that drivers do face, and also other road users when they're trying to see, is this driver going there, or what is happening?
So I want to move on to another group of people that is also causing concern to the TP, which is elderly pedestrians. And they actually make up most of the pedestrian deaths in 2025. And there were also 18 fatal cases of jaywalking, out of which 15 involved the elderly. So there's a reason for concern here among elderly pedestrians, right? And there are all these education campaigns, there are signs, there are posters on the roads that, use the overhead bridge or cross at a traffic light, but people still jaywalk. So I want to ask Bozy, do you think that firmer action needs to happen here from a legal standpoint, elderly or otherwise, but when it comes to jaywalking, do we need more laws about this?
I think you can have more laws around, something that is a dangerous phenomenon, right? This jaywalking situation. But I think a lot of it has to come from raising awareness, because the laws can be there, but insofar as to who's going to be always keeping a lookout, this is a jaywalker, and then going down like a speed ticket, here's your jaywalk ticket that, you need to pay a fine or whatsoever. I don't imagine that, the TP will be devoting so much resources on this particular group of people per se. But what I think the community maybe is lacking is in terms of the raising of awareness that, what does it mean to jaywalk? Yes, you don't see a traffic light or a pedestrian crossing, zebra crossing around, and then you just sort of walk. But do you jaywalk with the mindset that, if any car were to see me, they are supposed to stop because I have the right of way nevertheless, right? Some people jaywalk like it's their grandfather's road, and, that's not a pretty sight if there's an accident that happens. So if you Natasha, you talk about having more laws around it. Yes, maybe that would then, introduce punitive measures to say that, if you jaywalk, you're going to get a fine. That could, I think, scare people a little bit. But there's also maybe a group of people who are just stubborn. And, how's that going to assist?
Because I think, we've had road campaigns, road safety campaigns. I mean, since we're kids, like in school, I remember going to that park, the road safety park. Yeah, and you are taught, like from a child, when you're a child, not to do these things, and you hope that it will stay with you when you become an adult, but people still choose to do it. So I have to ask, like, if our laws are tougher, will it actually change behavior? Do you think?
to an extent, I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will. Just like how, a lot of drivers who get, into accidents because they've bitten a red light without thinking that, it's going to cause much of a trouble, face certain fines or DQs, disqualifications, and it affects their ability to drive. I should think that if the laws are, a lot stricter about jaywalking, it will send a message across. And then you have, on the newspapers, somebody who has jaywalked got fined X amount, and it will send a message across. But I think it's also about day-to-day reminders, as we talk about the elderly community, right? Sometimes they are walking places that are very familiar to them, and if they're so used to, walking in a certain way, right, it may be difficult for them to sort of just change immediately. And then what it calls for is a concerted effort, of people who are living together with the elderly or who are neighbors, the community, to say that, auntie, uncle, when you go on the streets today, please just be careful, don't be red light, make sure,
Just a reminder kind of
yeah,
thing,
just
right?
sort of, and then it sort of drives them. You can be naggy, but if it drives the message home, it drives the message home. Don't wait for the court order or the summons to bring it home for you.
Well, I mean, I was asking kind of like in general, like, do you, both of you, agree or disagree whether our laws need to be tougher, our traffic? Do you think that it needs to be tougher?
So if I may add, right, I think from the law point of view, I personally think that the punitive measures are in place and that they are good enough. The day-to-day reminders is a bit about where, places like my viral page comes in, right? Sometimes they just need to see a reminder that day to remember that, walking across the road and things like that is dangerous. And actually, I want to do a brief shout out because I think that LT has been doing a lot to make some of these small roads, especially in older housing estates, safer. How they narrow the road or they make the road curve a little bit, and they raise the pedestrian sidewalk, not the but the pedestrian crossing. These little things actually make a huge difference. I know because in my particular area, I won't mention where, but in the area, they have done it to some of the roads, and it has made a huge difference to the speed of the cars. So I like this term that I heard recently, and that's the concept of mutual accommodation. Mutual accommodation means that, yes, in this particular setting, I think it means that, yes, the old person shouldn't be jaywalking, but then out of habit, that's the market, that's their home, they're going to take the shortest route home, right? So to speak, right? And then the question is, the danger is posed by the faster moving, bigger vehicles in that place. What can we as the operators of the vehicles, the drivers, the riders do to mutually accommodate the fact that they will use the road in this way, although it's not the right way, they will use, how do we accommodate that as well? So I think mutually accommodating everybody who shares the road is such an important thing. And public education is everything. And
I think when people look at the stats, the report card that the traffic police came up with, it's kind of like, but we're such a rule-abiding country, and then like, what's happening here? Like, I mean, I guess it also to some extent is higher enforcement, but are we like different people when we get on the road? We kind of touched on it at the start of it about our road culture, but who are Singaporeans on the road, Jason?
Singaporeans are actually very law-abiding. I want to put that out straight and foremost. I've ridden and driven in many countries around the world, neighboring countries and further. And it's not a joke when I say that in some countries, the traffic rules and the lanes and the lights are all suggestions only. It's not a joke, but because you're right there, you're like, oh my goodness, it's really just a suggestion, right? Nobody cares about that, right? And the punitive measures are a joke to a lot of the people using those places, right? Maybe I should just give some actual examples so that we can draw the message home, right? If you ever moved around on a vehicle in the middle of Ho Chi Minh City, you will immediately understand what I mean by traffic rules being a complete suggestion down there. So let's contrast that to Singapore and other first world cities and out there. Yes, maybe our driving culture is not as great as, say, Japan, right? But actually, Singaporeans in general are very law-abiding and rule-abiding. So if you contrast the traffic stats in terms of those speeding and the reckless incidents versus the total number of vehicles on the road every day, I think that yes, there's more that can be done for us to be a more gracious society when it comes to driving and giving way and things like that. But those breaking the law actually is is a fraction of the number of people that are actually using the roads daily.
Bozy, looking at the clients who have come to you, what do you make of the Singaporean motorists and pedestrians on the road?
I think there is a fair amount of maybe say entitlement on when you're on the road, especially maybe in areas that you're familiar with, or if you're distracted by trying to like GPS find a certain place, that you feel that when you're in your zone that everyone else would know about it and they would give way to you. I think I see that quite a fair bit. But on the other hand, I also see a number of people who are very much law-abiding, pedestrians especially, who are looking left, looking right, and just crossing like it's a normal day. But unfortunately, some car decides to beat the red light and collide into them, right? So there is a fair mix of both. But I should think that, in all, okay, when it comes to being law-abiding, yes, we are. If not the stats, we have been even higher. We can always say that. But you know how we always go, low crime is not no crime, right? How do we then achieve a society that has even less? How can we bring the numbers down even more? And it's very worrying to me because the number of fatal accidents is going up higher, right? When a fatal accident happens, that's something that literally it doesn't just change that person's life. You say goodbye to that person's life, right?
So many people affected.
And it's not the most glamorous, if at all, way to say goodbye to your loved ones. And can you imagine, having that number of people who are, in the hospitals trying to see their last, sight of the family members? I just don't think that, that's something that is, to be advocated for at all. But then if you look back at why fatal accidents happen, right? Typically speaking, actually the human body can be considered as sturdy to an extent, right? But, if the speed is going on too fast, right? Or if, they don't even realize that they have knocked into something. I've seen police reports that literally state, I think I collided into something, but I don't know. Maybe it was a pet or something like that. And turns out to be a fatal accident. And so
when the person made the report,
yeah,
this is what they said. They thought they hit a cat or a dog.
Yeah. Exactly.
But it was a person.
So what is really going on in the psyche of this driver's mind when as they're driving is something that is really much to be considered. And whether or not the laws are not just in terms of whether you jaywalk, you beat red light, but also what are some of the behavior that you're exhibiting as you're on the road. I used to always joke that when I meet my friends, they're such different people when they're inside the car and when they're inside the hawker center as we eat our meals, because sometimes in the cars they are just like road raging to themselves or internally and externally, and it's quite funny but also quite scary to see it in that way, right?
Yeah.
Have the same friends.
Sometimes I reconsider the friendships, but for the most of it we're still friends.
Well, what kind of makes us ragey monsters when we get behind the wheel? Where's this evolution coming from? Like suddenly we become the Hulk and you cut in my lane kind of thing. Where does this come from?
Can I say that, jumping off from what Bozy was saying, the main word that we got to think about here is the entitlement.
Yeah, which we've spoken about a couple of times. Yeah. So where does this entitlement come from? Is it, I paid a lot for this car, I need to protect it, I need to use it as much as I can? Where's that entitlement coming from, you think?
That is a good question. I think how much the vehicles cost and how much I pay to maintain and continually use my vehicle every day is one part of it. But I think it also comes from that whole law-abiding structure that we have. In general, as Singaporeans, we are quite law-abiding in terms of how we do things. So if I'm obeying the rules, if I'm in my lane, if I'm doing things, then you should be as well. So any deviation from that, I'm like, hey, it's not just that my car is expensive, it's that this is my right of way to be coming out here. This is my right of way to be holding this space. How dare you come into it, right? So the graciousness takes a backseat, and the whole, what's the right word for it? It's almost like, when you say entitlement, you're actually saying that this person believes that he's 100% correct to be doing what he's doing, and you are wrong, right? So that part of it is very...
the right or wrong is dichotomous, it has to be that, I'm in my way. That's and right. Whoever who comes in is, cutting and not
correct.
Right.
So then there's no gray area where, I have the right of way, but you also need to make a turn shortly ahead. You must come into this lane, and maybe you missed the queue or whatever, you need to come in. How do I give way to that person without blowing a blood vessel. You know, I mean, the girl getting like really upset. Yeah,
Exactly. So it's sort of like thinking from another person's perspective
Yes,
as well. Like,
yes.
why would this person want to suddenly cut in,
Yes.
instead of thinking that it is their fault, but also just sort of understanding that maybe they really have something going on. So sometimes it's, I mean, this is on the road, but if you're talking about pedestrians who are just, on the pedestrian way as well, with cyclists and whatnot, sometimes people are just mindlessly walking, they are not looking out for, people who are maybe on wheelchairs, people who are, young school kids who are walking as well. They just feel that, I need to get like to the MRT station, so like I gotta just, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think like there's this tension, because you brought this up, there's like all these people on the roads, on the pavements, like the roads have to be shared with cyclists, with drivers, with sometimes PMDs on the roads, and then the PMDs are on the pavements, and then there's cyclists there too, and then people in wheelchairs being pushed, and then people walking, right? So is there like this tension in the road space that do you all feel like it's increased over the years?
Oh, it's huge. It's
Yeah,
huge. Maybe I'll touch on what I see on my point of view, because I think this is such an important topic about being able to see it from another person's point of view or another vehicle user's point of view. And I think that one of the discussions that I hear a lot, especially among like motorcyclists, okay? So I'm in motorcyclist communities. I ride my bicycles as well. I drive cars and all that. So I listen to all the discussions, and the main thing you hear, the common thread is that they don't know what the other group is seeing or thinking. And we often say that to be a better motorcyclist, you should drive a car. And then you know that the car driver is not trying to kill you. He can't see you. He has no idea you were there, right? And there's this thing that motorcyclists say sometimes, to reflect on the way they drive. They say the way they ride. They're like, I go out there and I ride like as though every car out there is trying to kill me.
Oh dear.
Right? Which is not bad, because it does breed a very ultra safe mentality. But you know what you probably can do better is you can go sit in the driver's seat and realize that when that driver is trying to change that lane and there are 20 headlights behind him, let's say for example, and you are lane splitting at a high speed and your headlight is this small compared to the 20 lights behind,
Right.
the chances of him not seeing you on that lane is very high, right? So then you think, okay, doesn't mean that he's not at fault. It just putting yourself in the shoes. And in the same way, it's vice versa. A lot of car drivers often complain about motorcyclists and cyclists, right? Don't cycle early in the morning when I'm trying to get to work. You're blocking my lane, all these kind of things, right? But at the same time, we are trying to push for a greener society where we can travel with, pedal power and all that. Then how, like that? So I think it's about taking the time to understand how each other. Actually, we always say that learning to ride a motorbike makes you a better driver. Because you're more aware of what a motorcyclist can see, can do, and the vulnerabilities. And I would say it's vice versa as well. I'm not advocating that everybody has to have a motorbike license and vice versa, but understanding what the other party can see or can't see is a very big step towards that whole mutual accommodation on the road already. Yeah.
So, Bozy, you wanted to add?
Yeah, no, and talking about mutual accommodation, but also perhaps, if there's one way that the laws can come in, or let's say public policy wise, is really having that demarcated lanes, right? I think there are some jurisdictions out there that really, especially the ones who are going very green, right? The cyclists are, they've really got their own lane. And it's I'm not saying that cyclists don't collide into cyclists per se, but at least, when you're on a certain lane, you have a certain expectation. Right. A lot of it, and what Jason has touched on, is also that when you're in a lane, you have certain thoughts of how this lane should go. That you should be able to drive in a particular way. And when something does not go in that, heuristically, your brain starts to work and go like, oh no, then what happens, right? And you try to be protective over yourself instead of thinking from another person's. So then, what if we can make the road safer by having very clearly demarcated lanes? The cyclists who want to do it on the road, and having that road lane to just set the expectations, and PMDs as well. Of course, if there's nobody who's using it, maybe then some people can do that. But as a society, at least in Singapore, I think we're slowly getting there with park connectors, with cycling paths. But it needs to be a bit more, sort of in the culture.
Yeah. I mean, my personal thoughts on the demarcated lanes is just that we just don't have the space for
Yeah.
it. I mean, I'd be very honest about it. I like the way that we are demarcating the bike lanes and the PMD lanes from the pedestrian lanes in the sidewalks, but the roads itself, I mean, there's some pilot projects in certain places, but as a whole, I think it's really very difficult to implement in a space-constrained place like Singapore. Yeah, but I love the idea. It works in other overseas.
Yeah, you never know if they could come up with like some creative ideas down the line. But I want to ask you all as a final takeaway, just one thing, having listened to our entire conversation today, what needs to change to fix things?
You want me to start?
Yes.
Okay. We started with the topic on culture, and we should end with the topic on culture, because at the end of the day, we are dealing with human beings. We're not dealing with a bunch of autonomous vehicles that are plying the roads. Although one day we might, I don't know. But for now, we're still dealing with a majority of human-operated vehicles, and therefore the culture of shared responsibility of safety, as well as mutual accommodation, as well as habits and skills is everything. I believe that what we are doing to try to raise awareness through the Riding Safety Association, we are trying to raise awareness of skill sets as well as public education for riders, right? But on Roads.sg and those pages, we are raising awareness for all road users. And a road user is not someone who operates vehicles. A road user is, as you correctly pointed out, a pedestrian. And a pedestrian could be a kid coming home from school. It could be an elderly person going to the market. So the levels and the way we provide this education and this awareness is so important that it needs to be diverse enough that everybody gets it, right? So I think we're doing a role that is becoming more and more important as more and more people are glued to their mobile devices. Right? I'm telling you that one thing I'm telling you is look up from that mobile device when you're walking as a pedestrian. Don't you all see that? AirPods in, mobile device, and just walking.
And just crossing the roads without like
Unbelievable,
just
right?
looking.
Yeah, my heart skips a beat
Unbelievable.
every time I see that.
Yeah, I mean, I have kids, and you don't know how much I drill into my kids that they don't look at devices, especially even walking in the car parks. You seen that, right? So, back to the user behavior point of view, if we can build a culture around everyone seeing it as their responsibility to keep everyone safe on the road, I think that would be a good step. And I think we are, as Singaporeans, very reliant on our authorities to start moving that messaging, right? So traffic police is doing their role, LTA is doing their role, road safety council is doing it. But then at the individual level, I think we all need to embrace the fact that whether or not I get home safely today is as much my job as it is the person beside me, is as much as it is the motorcyclist beside me. And sometimes, as the lawyer, right? When something very bad happens, then someone learns their lesson. And they don't dare do it. But if they don't get hit real hard or something like that hits home in a very near way, family-wise, people just forget, right? And they just use the roads as they think that they should or are entitled to. So that's the dangerous part of it.
Bozy, one thing that we need to change to fix our
But
road culture.
if it takes that accident to change your life, it may be too high a price to pay.
Too late.
And too
late,
late.
yeah.
So as someone who watches accident videos almost on a daily basis, I now practice defensive walking.
That makes two of us, by the way.
Yeah,
Watching accident videos on a daily
exactly.
basis.
Because of the claims that come in, and so even for me, when I walk, I make sure the light is green, and I'm off my devices, and I try to as much as possible, right? But it's a golden standard. So I think if there's one takeaway that I could give a shout out to, is to take a moment to look at the view, just for everybody out there, right? Because when you look up, when you see what is around you, I mean, I'm not saying take in the view like we've got mountains and, seas and skies per se, but to see who is around you. What are people doing? Are they speeding for the sake of it? Or perhaps, they are really rushing or whatsoever. And to take a moment to consider whether you can be the bigger person on the road to give way and be a bit more patient. It is, after all, as Jason has shared, a few seconds to a few minutes. What would a couple of additional minutes do? Yes, maybe over time it adds up. But if it's about saving that 1 to 2 minutes, but then like doom scrolling for the longest time, I would say just everybody can afford to be a bit more gracious on the road and to just be more patient. Take it slow.
You will save a life.
And you will save a life.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
On that note, thank you both for being here and for sharing your insights on road safety.
Thank you.
Yes,
Appreciate it.
That's it from the usual place today. Now, if you're watching us on YouTube, do subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you won't miss new episodes of the podcast. Now, if you have thoughts on what we just discussed today, do drop a comment on YouTube or talk to me on Instagram at The Usual Place Podcast. I'll see you next Thursday at noon. Stay safe.